Hello friends, it's good to see you again here on the channel. Welcome back to the Off-Grid Garage from Queensland in Australia. As you know guys, I'm building this battery shelf here at the moment, and we will have soon two rows of batteries here in parallel. That means we've got 16 cells in series to reach our 48 volt system voltage, and then we've got the same setup down here in the second shelf as well. And these two batteries are then in parallel connected to this copper bus bar over there. So to expand the storage of your battery, you can either parallel the cells first and then afterwards put them in series, or you can parallel the whole battery bank with another battery bank. And you cannot find many videos on YouTube online regarding this exact topic: how to parallel battery banks correctly, what to know, what are the risks, what are the benefits. And exactly this will be the topic of today's video. We are going to parallel two battery banks. We will measure, explore, observe, and hopefully learn a lot from this experiment. I'm not sure what the outcome will be. This is the first time I'm actually doing this. So far I know about the theory, but it hasn't been done before here in the Off-Grid Garage in sunny hot Australia. So nice to have you here on the channel. Thanks for tuning in, and well, let's get started. Okay, so yesterday I have already prepared our test setup here on my workbench. I wanted to do the test as interesting as possible so we learn a lot and cover as many questions and as many outcomes as possible. So I thought, instead of paralleling the same batteries as we will do here, what actually happens if we parallel completely different batteries? All of the batteries are lithium iron phosphate batteries, so the chemistry is the same, but the capacity can't be more different than what I have set up here on my workbench. Okay, let me walk you through this chaos here. So what we have here are two separate battery banks in a 4S configuration, a 12 volt battery. Here on the right, we've got the EV 3.2 volt, 304 ampere hour lithium iron phosphate batteries connected in series, cell number 1, 2, 3, 4. They are connected with the JBD-BMS, 100 amps. Balance leads are connected, and right after the BMS, we have a DC 2-pole circuit breaker, and afterwards we are connecting this battery here to this bus bar. Positive and negative. Here on the left we've got the Palo 3.2 volt, 5 ampere hours around in a 4S configuration as well. Cell number 1, 2, 3 and 4 in a series. Please excuse this weird V shape here, but otherwise my cables wouldn't be long enough. And here we have the 100 amp Jabata or JBD-BMS hooked up with all the balance leads already connected. After the BMS, we go through a circuit breaker as well, and then we've got negative and positive connected to the same bus bar as our EV battery bank over here. I haven't done any testing so far. This will be the maiden voyage of this test setup. Well, and this test setup seems to be very extreme. You know, why would you have a 304 ampere hour battery bank and connect a 5 ampere hour battery bank in parallel to increase the capacity? You know, but this is not the topic for today's test here. We don't want to actually increase the capacity. I mean, we are actually doing it, but this is not the purpose of this test setup. This is actually something people have asked a lot under my videos. What is happening if we parallel a very small capacity battery to a larger capacity battery? Is this working? Are we destroying the small battery bank while discharging or while charging? I have also set up two mobile phones here with the appropriate app for each BMS. So here on the left we've got the Xiang app, which shows us our 4 Palo cells here. And here on the right is the Smart BMS app for the JBD-BMS, and it shows us our EVE cells down here. So last night I have turned on the balancer of the JBD-BMS here to balance the Parlow cells, and because the DALI-BMS is lacking this feature, I have also connected one of the active balancers here, and well, what can I say? We've got a 2 millivolt deviation. These balancers work so well, it is unbelievable. It has balanced the whole battery pack here, these high capacity batteries, overnight to 3.37 volts. So I'm expecting the battery would be at around 90% state of charge, but I'm not sure. One of the cells was totally off yesterday, but it seems to have calibrated now. It is balanced completely, at least as per voltage. And according to our apps here, we've got 13.3 volt here in the Parlow and 13.4 in the EV battery here. So the voltages are almost the same. Before we start anything here, I just want to see how precise this actually is. So 13.28, and it shows us 13.8 here. We've got the EV 13.42, and it shows us 13.4 volts. So this all seems to be quite nice. All right, so I have not turned on any of these circuit breakers here. I have not turned on both at the same time either. So I just want to start with one and see what actually happens. I have checked all the wiring several times now, yesterday and this morning again. Everything seems to be fine. We've got the negative coming out of the circuit breaker here going to the bus bar, and this is our negative over here as well, coming from this BMS here. So if I turn on this circuit breaker, we have voltage here on these two bus bars. I've got the acrylic stand here, separator in between, just in case. It's not likely they will touch each other or so. Just for peace of mind, I've got something in between, so there's a clear separation between positive and negative. All right, let's turn on one and see. There should be nothing happening because this one is off, right? Okay, so this one is on. We should have, okay, we measure this again. Here, negative, positive. Yep, 13.28. Okay, if we turn this off again, we've got nothing. Okay, we do the same on the other side now, turning on this circuit breaker, leaving this one off. Okay, nothing happens. And we measure again here, yeah, 13.4 from the EV battery bank. Now, we have now a voltage difference of this battery bank, 13.4 to 13.3 over here. If I turn on this circuit breaker as well, we have both battery banks in parallel connected through these bus bars here. So my expectation would be that we have current flowing from this battery bank over the bus bar, over the circuit breaker, through the BMS, charging this battery bank. Lower voltage, higher voltage. It's only 100 millivolts, so I'm not sure how much current actually will flow. There is nothing in between which limits the current, apart from the 63 amps circuit breakers. I haven't got any smaller ones at the moment, so this is just for quickly turn off the whole battery bank, positive, negative. It isolates everything. Just in case something goes wrong, I can just flick it, bang, off. But these ones are not really here to protect our cables or even the batteries or something. So therefore, we are going into our BMS and we set some parameters here in the BMS for the Parlow cells, just to make sure the BMS is actually our current limiting device. Charge over current 3 amps. We are not allowing more than 3 amps going into the Parlow cells, which is the maximum they can take. And the discharge is set to 25 amps here. So this is the maximum the Parlow cells will be allowed to deliver. So 3 amps charging, 25 amps discharging is our limit in the JBD-BMS. Okay, and I want to do the same here for the DALI-BMS. We are going into the parameter settings here. So I have set the limit now in the DALI-BMS to maximum 25 amps charging and max 25 amps discharging for the EV high capacity battery. And before we turn on both circuit breakers, and I want to measure the amps coming out of this battery here in case there is something amazing going on. I want to have this on camera, right? So here on the left, we are looking at the JBD-BMS, and here on the right, we are looking at the discharging for the EV batteries. I'm turning on the EV battery bank. Okay, guys, I'm wearing my goggles just in case, you know. And now I'm turning on this circuit breaker, and hopefully there's nothing happening. Hang on. Here we go. Let's see if there's any current showing at all, or if we have a lot of current. 3, 2, 1. Okay, it is on. 1.5 amps, I can see here, 1.5 amps. And here on the app, we can also see 1.1 going into the Part1 cells. 1 amp, it's tapering off already. Current is going down. Okay, this was not too bad. That was all right. As you could see, 0.1 volt difference between these two battery banks, already 1.5 amps. And I mean, 1.5 amps is half of what the Part1 cells can accept, right? So if you have the big battery banks connected in parallel and you've got a voltage difference when you turn this on, expect some current flowing in between these banks. Apparently these are the so-called eddy currents. So it's an equalisation current between the battery banks. And we still have 0.5 of an amp going from this battery here into the Part1 cells to charge them up. Both apps don't show me anything anymore, 0 amps, because we are under the threshold. Okay, that was, well, that was the first test, right? That was the first test. So when you parallel your battery banks, make sure they are on the same voltage level. A small voltage difference is not as bad, but with these batteries here, you can expect a high current input or output. If you have such a battery here in parallel, they can deliver a lot of current and the next one can accept a lot of current. So there could be potential a very, very high current going from one battery bank into another one. So really make sure they are on the same voltage. State of charge, totally different thing, but voltage is critical here when we turn on both circuit breakers. They need to have the same voltage. If they are not, don't turn it on. Discharge one of the batteries or charge the other one so they are on the same voltage level. Okay, so next thing would be to actually connect a charger, because we want to charge our parallel battery banks. We've got now 304 ampere hours plus 5 ampere hours, so it makes in total 309 ampere hours. And here on the app we can now perfectly see that all the battery cells of both battery banks are at the same voltage. So nice, they have already equalized. Okay, to start with, I would say we are going with 13.8 volts. We are 13.4 in both battery banks now. So then we connect the negative over here to our negative bus bar, and this is our positive here. And I'm just tabbing it quickly just to see there's no big spark or something coming. That all seems to be fine. Okay, connected. And we are charging with 800 milliamps, both battery banks at the same time. Okay, let's see what's happening actually here. None of the apps shows us any current flowing here at all. That is disappointing, but this is just the thresholds these two BMSs have here. Okay, let's hook up the ampere meter and see how much current is actually going in here. We've got 500 milliamps going into the EV cells, and we've got here 300 milliamps going into the Part1 cells. So 500, 300 just by itself. I'm not controlling where the current is going. All the batteries are on the same level, they are on the same voltage now, and we are charging with 800 milliamps all in total. Okay, let's increase the charging to say 1.6. We can now see the discharging shows us 1.1 amp going into the EVE cell and 0 amps going into the Part1 cells, which is disappointing, but we are charging with 400 milliamps here into the Part1 cells. Okay, we measure here again. Yeah, 1.2 amps into the big battery, 400 milli into the small one. So again, 1.2, 0.4 makes 1.6. This is what we are charging with. it distributes the power just by itself. Okay, let's go even higher. Let's go 2.5. We've got 2 amps going into the EV, and then the rest, 500 milliamps, going into the Palo cells only. And now you can see both apps actually showing current here, 1.9 on the Dali and 0.5 on the Xiaoxiang for the JBD-BMS from Italy. So this is a very interesting test already. You can see how the current actually distributes just automatically. Most of the current goes into the big battery and only a small amount goes into the smaller cells. And 2.5 amps would be already the limit for the Palo cells now, right? So if we increase this one and going actually almost 4 amps. Okay, let's measure here. 3.14 and 0.7 into the Palo. So again, current automatically distributes by itself. Most of the current goes in here, only a small amount into the Palo cells. So here comes one problem now. If I turn off this breaker, the EVE is off and the full 4 amps would go into the Palo cells here, right? So in case of a fault now, or in case something happened and the circuit breaker trips, it leaves our energy source connected to only one battery bank, and we could potentially damage it because our charge current is a lot higher. Okay, shall we try that? I'm turning off, you will hear the click once the breaker turns off, and we watch the current here on the actual power supply, and we also have the current here on the app of the JBD-BMS. There we go. So the current actually goes down to 2 amps only, under the threshold of 3 amps, which is maximum for these Palo cells. And we are not charging anything into the EV cells anymore. And all the current now is going into our Palo cells. Okay, we turn this back on and see what happens then. There we go, 3.7 amps again. And we could see here on the app for the JBD-BMS, the current actually went to 0 for a short amount. Because I think these batteries were now charged a bit higher than these ones and delivered actually current back through our bus bars as well into the EV just for a few seconds. That's why the current went back to 0. And the same here again, if I turn off the Palo cells now with the circuit breaker, let's watch the current. Yeah, all of the current goes into the EV. It dropped only by 100 milliamps or something. So now it comes, because we have a higher voltage again in the EV than in the Palo. If I turn on the Palos again, I would expect a high current inrush into the Palo cells. And let's see how much this actually is now. We turn it back on. 1.4 amps here on the app. 1.2, it already tapers off. So it looks like the batteries are actually fairly equally charged from what I can see. Okay, my friends, I think this is it for this video, for part 1 of this video. We have done a lot of experimenting today already and have learned a lot. I find this quite interesting, how the actual current distributes just by itself between these two so different battery banks. In tomorrow's video, we will hook up the big power supply here, 60 volts, 21 amps, 1.2 kilowatts. And we'll charge the battery as fast as possible, and we'll see what happens if we charge with 20 amps and then turn off one of the circuit breakers and see if there's actually 20 amp going into the Palos, which would totally destroy them. And we also do the discharge test and see if we discharge these battery banks in parallel with a small current, a medium and a high current. Where's the energy coming from? Do we see a similar distribution of power coming from the big one to the small battery cell? And then, as the final step, we also explore why this is as it is. So why is the power distributing like this? Why is there more power going into the big one rather than in the small one? thank you so much for all your support here on the channel. Also thanks to all these 60 people turning on this morning to Maddie's live stream on the Digital Mermaid YouTube channel. Thanks so much for supporting her as well. And until the next video coming out tomorrow morning, stay charged, stay safe, and thanks for watching again. See you then. Bye bye.